I stood at the edge of their dining room, my hands trembling as I clutched the stack of envelopes, each one a silent scream of the truth I'd buried for years. The smell of roasted turkey and sage filled the air, but it couldn't mask the bitterness that had festered in me since last Thanksgiving. My daughter-in-law, Claire, had insisted on paper plates, her smile sharp as a blade when she handed me one, saying, "It's just easier. Margaret. No fuss. No fuss." As if I were a guest in my own son's home, a stranger to be managed with disposable courtesy. She didn't know I'd been paying their mortgage, their car loans, their credit card bills, every cent that kept their perfect little life afloat. I'd done it out of love, out of loyalty to my son, David. But that night, as I stood there, I realized love had twisted into something darker. I wanted her to feel the weight of her dismissal, to know what it cost to keep her world spinning. The dining room was a stage, and I was no longer content to play the quiet mother-in-law. Claire bustled in, her auburn hair swept into a perfect bun, her apron pristine despite hours in the kitchen. She was the picture of control, always had been. David sat at the head of the table, his eyes darting between us, sensing the storm but too weary to name it. Their two kids, Lily and Max, were upstairs, spared from the tension that crackled like static. I'd spent the last year swallowing my pride, but tonight, I'd brought the truth with me, tucked into those envelopes. Each one was a piece of the life I'd propped up, a ledger of my sacrifice. I'd planned this moment for months, rehearsing every word, every glance, imagining the look on Claire's face when she realized what I'd done for them, what she'd taken for granted. It started a year ago, that first Thanksgiving after David lost his job. He didn't tell Claire. He was too proud, too ashamed. Instead, he came to me, his face pale, his voice breaking as he asked for help. "Just until I get back on my feet, Mom," he'd said. I didn't hesitate. I'd always been there for him, ever since his father left us when he was 10. I'd worked double shifts at the hospital, scrimped and saved, to give him a life better than mine. So I paid their bills, month after month, telling myself it was temporary. But Claire never knew. She thought David's new consulting gig was covering everything. She'd smile at me across the table, her eyes cold, as if I were an inconvenience, a relic she tolerated for David's sake. And then came the paper plates. That moment burned into me. I'd arrived with a homemade pecan pie, my mother's recipe, expecting a seat at their table, a place in their family. But Claire handed me that flimsy plate, her voice dripping with condescension. "It's just practical," she said, as if my presence was a chore. I saw it then, the way she saw me, the way she dismissed me. I wasn't family to her. I was an obligation. I ate my meal in silence, the paper plate bending under the weight of the food, my heart bending under the weight of her disdain. That night, I decided I'd had enough. I'd show her. I'd make her see. Over the next year, I kept paying their bills, but I started collecting proof. Bank statements, payment confirmations, emails from David begging for more time. I built a case, not just against Claire, but against the lie we'd all been living. I wanted her to know the truth, to feel the sting of her own ignorance. But it wasn't just about revenge. Deep down, I wanted something more: redemption. Maybe, for both of us. I wanted her to see me, really see me, not as the meddling mother-in-law, but as the woman who'd held their family together. I wanted her to understand the cost of loyalty, The price of love. Tonight, as I stood in their dining room, the envelopes felt heavier than ever. Claire was setting the table, her movements precise, her smile a mask. "Margaret, you're early," she said, her tone light but edged with irritation. I nodded, my throat tight. I'd planned this down to the minute. The kids were upstairs, distracted by a movie. David was pouring wine, his hands unsteady. I could feel the moment building, the air growing thick with what was coming. I set the envelopes on the table, my fingers brushing the paper, and Claire's eyes flicked to them, a flicker of curiosity breaking her composure. "What's that?" she asked, her voice sharp. I didn't answer. Not yet. I sat down, my heart pounding. The table was set with real plates this time. A small victory I hadn't expected. Maybe she'd sensed something. Or maybe it was just a coincidence. Either way, it didn't matter. I was done being invisible. I looked at David, his face lined with exhaustion, and felt a pang of guilt. He didn't know what I was about to do. He didn't know I'd stopped paying the bills last month, letting the notices pile up, waiting for the moment they'd hit. I wanted Claire to see them, to open those envelopes and realize the life she thought she'd built was a house of cards I'd been holding up. "Margaret, you okay?" David asked, his voice soft. I nodded, forcing a smile. Claire was watching me now, her eyes narrowing. She sensed something was off, but she couldn't place it. That's when I knew it was time. I reached for the first envelope, my fingers steady despite the storm inside me. "Claire," I said, my voice calm but laced with steel. "We need to talk." She froze, her hand hovering over a serving dish. David looked up, his eyes wide. The room seemed to hold its breath, and I felt the weight of every choice, every sacrifice, pressing down on me. This was it. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. I slid the envelope across the table, my eyes locked on hers. "Open it," I said. Her fingers hesitated, then reached for it, her movement slow, deliberate. She tore it open, her eyes scanning the contents, and I saw the exact moment her world began to crack. Her face paled, her lips parting as she read the overdue notice, the numbers stark and unforgiving. "What is this?" she whispered, her voice trembling. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The truth was there, in black and white, and it was only the beginning. Claire's hands shook as she held the overdue notice, her eyes darting over the numbers, the bold red letters screaming past due. The dining room was silent except for the faint hum of the kids' movie upstairs, a distant reminder of the life we were all pretending to hold together. David leaned forward, his brow furrowed, his voice low. "Mom, what's going on?" I didn't look at him. I couldn't. Not yet. My eyes were fixed on Claire, on the way her composure cracked like thin ice underfoot. She set the paper down, her movements deliberate, as if she could control the chaos I'd just unleashed. "Margaret," she said, her voice tight. "What is this?" I leaned back in my chair, folding my hands in my lap, letting the moment stretch. "It's the truth," I said simply. She laughed, a sharp, brittle sound that didn't reach her eyes. "The truth. This is some kind of mistake. David, tell her." She turned to him, expecting him to back her up, to smooth over the crack I'd exposed. But David's face was a mask of guilt, his eyes avoiding hers. That's when she knew. The air shifted, heavy with the weight of secrets we'd all carried for too long. I reached for another envelope, sliding it toward her. "There's more," I said. Her hand hovered over it, then pulled back, as if the paper might burn her. "David," she said again, her voice sharper now. "What's she talking about?" He opened his mouth, but no words came. I could see the panic in his eyes, the realization that the lie he'd built was crumbling. I'd wanted this moment, dreamed of it, but now that it was here, it felt heavier than I'd expected. I'd spent months planning my revenge, imagining Claire's humiliation, but seeing her like this vulnerable, betrayed stirred something in me I hadn't anticipated. Guilt, maybe, or regret. But I pushed it down. I'd come too far to stop now. "Open it," I said again, my voice steady. She glared at me, her eyes blazing, but she tore open the envelope, her fingers trembling. Another notice. This one for the car loan. Her eyes widened, and she shoved it toward David. "You said you paid this. You said everything was fine." Her voice rose, cracking with anger and fear. David reached for her hand, but she pulled away, her chair scraping against the floor. "Claire, I can explain," he started, but she cut him off. "Explain what?" "That you lied to me. That we're drowning in debt and you didn't tell me." She turned to me, her face a storm of emotions. "And you've been sitting on this. What? To humiliate me. To prove some point." I wanted to tell her it wasn't about humiliation. Not entirely. It was about being seen. About making her understand the sacrifices I'd made. But the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I reached for the stack of envelopes, pulling out another. "I've been paying your bills," I said, my voice low but firm. "For a year. Every month. Mortgage. Car. Credit cards. All of it." The words hung in the air, heavy and sharp, cutting through the tension like a knife. Claire froze, her eyes locked on mine, searching for a lie. David's head dropped into his hands, and I felt a pang of sorrow for him, for the weight he'd carried alone. "You're lying," Claire whispered, but there was no conviction in her voice. She knew it was true. She'd seen the notices, the proof I'd laid out like a prosecutor building a case. I shook my head. "I did it for David. For the kids. For you." That last part was harder to say, but it was true. I told myself I was doing it for my son. But somewhere along the way, I'd wanted to protect their family. Even her. Claire's face crumpled, and for a moment, I thought she might cry. But she didn't. She straightened, her jaw tight, and pushed the envelopes away. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I could have said it was because she'd never listened. Because she'd treated me like an outsider. Because her paper plates had been the final straw. But instead, I said, "I wanted you to have the life you thought you had." It was the truth. Or part of it. I'd wanted to preserve the illusion. To keep their family intact. Even if it meant erasing myself. But that was before. Before the resentment grew. Before I decided to stop being invisible. Claire stared at me. Her eyes a mix of anger and something else hurt. Maybe. Or shame. David finally spoke. His voice hoarse. "Mom, I told you not to tell her. I was going to fix it. I turned to him, my heart aching. You couldn't fix it. David. You were drowning. And I was the only one keeping you afloat. He flinched. And I hated myself for it. But it was true. I'd carried them all. And I was tired. Tired of the secrets. Tired of the lies. I wanted them to see me. To understand what I'd done. But now, looking at Claire's pale face, David's broken expression, I wondered if I'd gone too far. Claire stood, her chair tipping back, but not falling. You think this makes you a hero? She spat, her voice shaking. You think throwing this in my face makes you better than me? I didn't answer. I didn't know how. She grabbed the stack of envelopes, her hands shaking, and tore them open one by one, the papers spilling across the table like leaves in a storm. Each one was another piece of the truth, another weight on her shoulders. I watched her, my heart pounding, knowing this was the climax I'd planned, the moment I'd wanted. But it didn't feel like victory. It felt like loss. The dining room felt like a battlefield, the table strewn with torn envelopes and crumpled notices, each one a grenade I'd lobbed into the heart of their marriage. Claire's hands shook as she clutched the last notice, her eyes scanning the words as if she could will them away. David sat motionless, his face buried in his hands, unable to meet her gaze. The silence was suffocating, broken only by the distant laughter of Lily and Max upstairs, oblivious to the war unfolding below. I wanted to feel triumphant, to savor the moment I'd spent a year building toward. But all I felt was a hollow ache. This wasn't just about Claire anymore. It was about all of us, me. David. The kids. The family I tried to save and maybe broken instead. Claire's voice cut through the silence, sharp and raw. How could you let this happen? David. She wasn't looking at me now. Her anger had shifted, a spotlight swinging from me to him. You let her pay for everything. You let me think we were fine. David's shoulders slumped, and I saw the weight of his shame. The same shame I'd seen when he first came to me, begging for help. I didn't want you to worry, he mumbled, his voice barely audible. I thought I could fix it. Claire laughed, a bitter, jagged sound. Fix it? We're about to lose everything. And you thought you could fix it. I wanted to intervene, to tell her it wasn't just David's fault, that I'd chosen to keep the secret too. But I stayed silent, watching as the truth unraveled them. Claire turned to me, her eyes blazing. And you? You think this makes you some kind of martyr? Paying our bills behind my back, then throwing it in my face like this. Her words stung, but I didn't flinch. I did it for my son, I said, my voice steady. And for your kids. I didn't want them to lose their home. Her face softened for a fraction of a second, but then the anger returned, harder than before. Don't you dare use my kids to justify this. She snapped. I leaned forward, my hands gripping the edge of the table. You don't get to lecture me about your kids, Claire. I've been there for them every step of the way. Who do you think paid for Lily's dance lessons? Max's soccer camp. You thought David was covering all that. Her mouth opened, then closed, her eyes darting to the papers on the table as if they might hold the answers. I saw the moment it hit her, the realization that every piece of their life, their house, their cars, their kids' dreams had been propped up by me. She sank back into her chair, her face pale, her hands trembling. David finally looked up, his eyes red, Mom, you should have told me you were going to do this. His voice was a mix of anger and despair, and it cut deeper than Claire's words. I'd wanted to protect him, to shield him from the fallout, but I'd only made it worse. I had to. I said softly. You were drowning. David. Both of you were. I couldn't keep carrying it alone. He shook his head, his jaw tight. You didn't have to do it like this. I wanted to argue, to tell him I'd had no choice. That Claire's dismissal, her paper plates, her cold smiles, had pushed me to this. But I didn't. Instead, I reached for the last envelope, the one I'd saved for the end. It wasn't a bill. It was a letter, one I'd written months ago, when the anger was fresh and raw. I'd poured everything into it, me hurt, my love, my hope for something better. I slid it toward Claire, my heart pounding. Read this, I said. She hesitated, her eyes flicking between me and the envelope, then reached for it, her movement slow, wary. As she unfolded the letter, I watched her face, searching for a sign of what she was feeling. The room was silent, the tension so thick it felt like a physical thing, pressing against my chest. She read in silence, her eyes moving quickly over the words. I'd written about the paper plates, how they'd made me feel like an outsider in my own family. I'd written about the bills, the sacrifices, the nights I'd lain awake worrying about them. But I'd also written about forgiveness, about wanting to find a way forward, together. I didn't know if she'd hear that part, or if the anger would drown it out. When she finished, she set the letter down, her hands steady now. She didn't look at me, not at first. She stared at the table, at the mess of papers, the evidence of our fractured family. You think this fixes everything? She said finally, her voice low, almost broken. You think writing a letter makes up for this ambush? I shook my head. It's not about fixing things, Claire. It's about being honest. I'm tired of pretending. She looked at me then, really looked at me, and for the first time, I saw something other than anger in her eyes. Hurt. Yes. But also something softer, understanding. Maybe. Or the beginning of it. David reached for her hand again. And this time, she didn't pull away. We need to talk, he said, his voice steady despite the strain. All of us. I nodded, my throat tight. This wasn't the end I'd imagined, not the clean victory I'd planned. But maybe it was something better. Maybe it was a start. The dining room was a graveyard of truths, the table littered with the wreckage of our secrets. Claire sat across from me, her eyes fixed on the letter I'd written, its edges curling slightly under her fingers. David's hand rested on hers, a fragile tether in the storm we'd unleashed. The kids' laughter drifted down from upstairs, a cruel contrast to the silence that hung between us. I'd wanted this moment to feel like justice, like a reckoning for every slight, every paper plate, every cold glance Claire had thrown my way. But now, with the truth laid bare, I felt exposed, raw, as if I'd torn open my own wounds along with theirs. Claire finally spoke, her voice low but steady. You could have told me, Margaret. You didn't have to do it like this. Her words weren't an accusation this time. Not exactly. There was a weariness in them, a weight that matched my own. I wanted to tell her I'd tried, in my own way, to bridge the gap between us. The pies I'd baked, the offers to babysit, The quiet ways I'd tried to be part of their lives all met with her polite distance. But I didn't say that. Instead, I said, I didn't know how. You never seemed to want me here. Her eyes flicked up, sharp and searching. That's not true, she said, but her voice faltered, and I knew she was questioning herself. David squeezed her hand, his face a mix of guilt and resolve. She's right, Claire, he said softly. You've never made it easy for her. Claire pulled her hand away, her jaw tightening. So this is my fault. I'm the villain because I didn't roll out the red carpet for your mother. Her voice rose, and I saw the anger flare again. But it was different now, less certain, tinged with doubt. I leaned forward, my hands clasped tightly to keep them from shaking. I don't think you're the villain, Claire. I just wanted you to see me. My voice cracked, betraying the emotion I tried to bury. I've been here, all this time, holding you all up, and you treated me like I didn't matter. The words spilled out, raw and unfiltered, and I saw her flinch, as if they'd struck something deep. She looked away, her eyes glistening, and for a moment, I thought she might cry. But she didn't. She straightened, her face hardening again. You think I don't see you? I see you, Margaret. Always watching, always judging. You think I don't know how you look at me? Her words hit like a slap, and I felt the air leave my lungs. I'd never thought of myself as judgmental, but maybe she was right. Maybe I'd been watching her, waiting for her to prove herself worthy of my son, my grandchildren. Maybe I'd been unfair. I opened my mouth to respond, but David cut in, his voice sharp. Enough. Both of you. He stood, his chair scraping against the floor. And for the first time, I saw the man he'd become, not just my son, but a husband, a father, trying to hold his family together. We're not doing this. Not tonight. He looked at me, his eyes pleading. Mom, I know what you did for us. I know what it cost you. But this, he gestured at the table. The papers. The letter, this isn't the way. Then he turned to Claire, his voice softening. And you. You need to stop pushing her away. She's family. Claire's face crumpled, and she looked down, her fingers tracing the edge of the letter. I wanted to reach out, to say something to ease the tension, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I stood, my legs unsteady, and walked to the kitchen. I needed a moment to breathe, to escape the weight of their eyes. The kitchen was warm, the smell of turkey and stuffing still lingering, but it felt like a foreign place. Not the heart of a home, but a stage for our conflict. I leaned against the counter, my hands gripping the edge, and closed my eyes. I'd wanted Claire to feel small, to understand what I'd done for them. But now I wondered if I'd only made things worse. The truth was supposed to set us free, but it felt like a chain, binding us all to this moment. When I returned to the dining room, Claire was gone. David stood by the table, gathering the papers, his movement slow, deliberate. She went upstairs, he said without looking at me. She needs time. I nodded, my throat tight. I didn't mean to hurt her, I said, and I meant it. He looked at me then, his eyes heavy with exhaustion. I know, Mom. But you did. His words cut deeper than I expected, and I felt the weight of my choices settle into my bones. I sat down, staring at the letter still on the table. I'd written it in anger, but also in hope that we could find a way to be a family again. Now, I wasn't sure if that was possible. David sat beside me, his hand resting on mine. "We'll figure this out," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. I wanted to believe him, but the truth was out now, and there was no going back. The question was what we'd do with it, whether we'd let it tear us apart or use it to build something new. The house felt quieter now, the kind of quiet that follows a storm, when the air is heavy with what's been left behind. David sat across from me, his hands folded on the table, the papers neatly stacked now, as if order could somehow mend what had broken. Upstairs, Claire was with the kids, her absence a palpable weight in the room. I wanted to go to her, to say something to bridge the chasm I'd opened, but I didn't know where to start. My plan had been so clear: expose the truth, make her see. But now, with the wreckage of our family laid bare, I wasn't sure what I'd achieved. David broke the silence, his voice low. "Why didn't you just talk to me, Mom? Why did it have to be like this?" His eyes searched mine, and I saw the hurt there, the betrayal. I thought I was protecting him, sparing him the shame of his financial failures, but I'd only added to his burden. "I thought I was helping," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I thought if I kept it quiet, you could keep your pride." He shook his head, a bitter smile tugging at his lips. "My pride's been gone a long time, Mom. You didn't need to protect it." His words stung, but they were true. I'd been so focused on Claire, on her dismissal, her paper plates, that I'd overlooked the real cost of my silence. I'd kept David in the dark, too, treating him like the boy he'd been instead of the man he was. "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it. He nodded, but his eyes were distant, as if he were trying to piece together how we'd gotten here. "Claire's not perfect," he said after a moment, "but she's trying. She's been trying to hold us together, same as you." I wanted to argue, to point out all the ways she'd pushed me away, but I stopped myself. Maybe David was right. Maybe Claire's coldness had been her own way of coping, of keeping control in a life that was slipping through her fingers. I thought of the letter, the words I'd poured into it, and wondered if she'd really read them, if she'd seen the part where I'd asked for forgiveness, for a chance to start over. "Do you think she'll talk to me?" I asked, my voice small. David sighed, rubbing his temples. "Give her time, Mom. She's hurt, but she's not unreasonable." I nodded, but doubt gnawed at me. Claire had always been a fortress, her walls high and unyielding. I'd thought breaking them down would feel like victory, but it only felt like destruction. I stood, my legs heavy, and walked to the window, staring out at the darkening street. The neighborhood was quiet, the houses glowing with the warmth of Thanksgiving. Families gathered around tables that weren't battlegrounds. I envied them, their simplicity, their peace. David joined me at the window, his shoulder brushing mine. "We'll get through this," he said, but his voice was more hope than certainty. I wanted to believe him, to believe we could rebuild what I'd torn apart. But the weight of my actions pressed down on me. I'd wanted justice, but what I'd gotten was chaos. "I didn't mean for it to go like this," I said, my voice breaking. He put a hand on my shoulder, his touch steady. "I know. But we're here now. We have to figure out what's next." I turned to him, my eyes stinging. What if she hates me? The question slipped out before I could stop it. raw and vulnerable. David's face softened. And for a moment, I saw the boy he'd been. The one who'd clung to me after his father left. She doesn't hate you, Mom. She's angry. But she doesn't hate you. I wanted to believe him. But the memory of Claire's eyes, blazing with betrayal, lingered like a bruise. We sat back down. The silence less oppressive now, but still heavy. I glanced at the letter, still on the table, and wondered if I should have written it differently. If I should have left out the anger and focused only on the hope. But it was too late for that. The truth was out, and all we could do was face it. I heard footsteps on the stairs, and my heart leapt, hoping it was Claire, ready to talk. But it was Lily, her hair messy, her eyes bright with the innocence of childhood. "Grandma, are we eating soon?" she asked, oblivious to the storm that had passed. I forced a smile, my heart aching. "Soon, sweetheart," I said, pulling her into a hug. She smelled of crayons and shampoo, a reminder of why I'd done this, why I kept paying their bills even when it hurt. For her, for Max, for the family I loved, even when it didn't love me back. David watched us, his eyes soft, and I saw a flicker of hope there, a chance that we could find a way forward. But Claire's absence loomed, and I knew this wasn't over. Not yet. Lily's small hand slipped from mine as she ran back upstairs, her footsteps a fleeting echo in the heavy silence of the dining room. David and I sat alone, the table between us a battlefield of papers and unspoken words. The letter I'd written lay untouched, its words a fragile bridge I wasn't sure Claire would cross. I wanted to believe David, that she didn't hate me. That time would soften her anger. But the doubt lingered, sharp and cold. I'd planned this moment to reclaim my place in their lives, to make Claire see me. But now I wondered if I'd only pushed her further away. David stood, gathering the papers with a quiet determination. "I'm going to talk to her," he said, his voice firm but tired. I nodded, my throat tight, unsure if I should follow or stay. He paused at the foot of the stairs, looking back at me. "Mom, don't leave yet. Please." His eyes held a plea, not just for me to stay in the house, but to stay in their lives, to not give up on the family we'd become. I nodded again, unable to speak, and watched him disappear upstairs. Alone in the dining room, I felt the weight of the evening settle into my bones. The smell of turkey and stuffing still hung in the air, but it felt stale now, like a memory of a holiday that had never quite happened. I walked to the table, my fingers brushing the letter. I'd written it in a moment of clarity, or so I'd thought, pouring out my hurt, my love, my hope for something better. But now, reading it in my mind, I wondered if I'd been too harsh, if my need for justice had overshadowed my need for connection. I heard voices upstairs, low and tense, and my heart clenched. I couldn't make out the words, but the rhythm of their argument was familiar. David's quiet pleading, Claire's sharp retorts. I wanted to go to them, to explain myself, but I knew it wasn't my place. Not yet. Instead, I sat back down, my hands folded in my lap, and waited. The clock on the wall ticked on, each second stretching into eternity. I thought of last Thanksgiving, of the paper plate in my hand, the way it had bent under the weight of the food, the way my heart had bent under Claire's dismissal. That moment had sparked this, but it wasn't the whole story. The truth was, I'd always felt like an outsider in their lives, From the moment David brought Claire home, her confidence, her poise, had intimidated me. She was everything I wasn't: polished, ambitious, in control. I tried to connect with her, to find common ground, but she'd kept me at arm's length. Her smiles polite but distant. I told myself it was her, that she was the one who didn't want me. But now I wondered if I'd been part of the problem. Had I judged her too quickly? Had I seen her strength as a threat instead of a gift? The voices upstairs grew quieter, and I heard the soft creak of the floorboards. My heart leapt, hoping it was Claire. But it was David again. Alone. His face was drawn, his eyes heavy with exhaustion. "She's not ready to talk," he said, sitting across from me. "She's angry, Mom. Not just at you, but at me. At herself." I nodded, my chest tight. "I didn't mean to hurt her," I said, repeating the words I'd said earlier, as if saying them enough would make them true. David sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I know, but it's going to take time." He reached for the letter, his fingers brushing the paper. "She read this," he said, his voice soft. "She didn't say much, but I could tell it hit her. The part about wanting to be a family again, that got to her." My heart lifted. Just a fraction, but it was enough to keep me going. "Do you think she'll forgive me?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. David hesitated, his eyes searching mine. "I don't know, Mom, but I think she wants to try." That was enough for now. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But a crack in the wall. A sliver of hope. I thought of the kids. Of Lily's bright eyes. Max's shy smile. And felt a renewed sense of purpose. I'd done this for them. For the family I loved. Even when it hurt. But I'd also done it for myself. To reclaim the place I'd lost. Now, I had to decide what came next, whether to keep pushing, or to step back and let them come to me. David stood, glancing at the stairs. "I'm going to check on the kids," he said. "Stay for dinner, Mom. Please." I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. As he left, I looked at the letter again. Its words a reminder of the bridge I tried to build. I didn't know if Claire would cross it, but I knew I'd keep it there, waiting. The night wasn't over, and neither was our story. The dining room was a shadow of the Thanksgiving I'd imagined. The table still cluttered with the remnants of our confrontation papers. Envelopes. The letter that had bared my soul. I sat alone, the silence pressing against me. The faint hum of the kids' movie upstairs a reminder of the life that continued despite the chaos I'd unleashed. David's words echoed in my mind. "She wants to try." It wasn't much, but it was something to thread to hold on to in the unraveling of our family. I wanted to believe we could rebuild. That the truth, painful as it was, could be the foundation for something stronger. But doubt lingered, heavy and unyielding, as I waited for Claire to come down. I stood, needing to move, and wandered to the kitchen. The counters were lined with dishes, real ones this time, not paper, and I felt a flicker of irony. Claire had set the table properly tonight, as if she'd known something was coming, or maybe as a small gesture of peace. I ran my fingers over a ceramic plate, its weight solid, grounding. I thought of last year, of the paper plate bending in my hands, and felt a pang of regret. Maybe I'd read too much into it, turned a small slight into a war. But it wasn't just the plates. It was everything: the way Claire looked past me, the way I'd felt invisible in their lives. I heard footsteps behind me and turned, my heart leaping. It was Claire. She stood in the doorway, her arms crossed, her face unreadable. Her eyes were red, but her jaw was set, and I braced myself for whatever came next. "Margaret," she said, her voice low but steady. "We need to talk." I nodded, my throat tight, and gestured to the table. She hesitated, then sat, her hands folded tightly in her lap. I sat across from her, the distance between us feeling like miles. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence was heavy, charged with everything we hadn't said. Finally, she broke it. "I read your letter," she said, her eyes fixed on the table. "All of it." I waited, my heart pounding, unsure if this was an olive branch or another accusation. She looked up, her eyes meeting mine, and I saw something new, their vulnerability, raw and unguarded. "I didn't know," she said, her voice cracking. "About the bills. About what you've been doing. I thought we were okay." I wanted to reach out, to tell her I hadn't meant to hurt her, but the words felt inadequate. Instead, I said, "I didn't want you to know. I thought it would be easier that way." She laughed, a bitter sound that cut through the air. "Easier? For who?" "For you. For David." She shook her head, her hands clenching. "You let me think I was holding everything together, when it was you all along." Her words were sharp, but there was pain beneath them, and I realized she wasn't just angry at Mesh, was angry at herself. "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it. "I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't think you'd listen." Her eyes flashed, but she didn't argue. Instead, she leaned back, her shoulders slumping. "Maybe I wouldn't have," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I haven't exactly made it easy for you." It was the closest she'd come to an apology, and it caught me off guard. I'd spent so long seeing her as the enemy. I hadn't considered that she might be struggling too. "I wanted to be part of this family," I said, my voice trembling. But I always felt like I was on the outside, looking in. Claire's eyes softened, and for the first time, I saw her not as my adversary, but as a woman trying to navigate her own fears, her own insecurities. "I didn't mean to push you out," she said. I wanted to prove I could do it. Be a good wife, a good mother. I didn't want to need anyone." Her words hit me like a wave, washing away some of the anger I'd carried. I'd seen her strength as a barrier, but maybe it was a shield, protecting her from the fear of failing. "You don't have to do it alone," I said softly. "None of us do." She looked at me, her eyes searching, and I saw a flicker of hope, a chance to rebuild. But then her face hardened again, and she stood, her chair scraping against the floor. "I need time, Margaret," she said. "This doesn't just go away." I nodded, my heart heavy but lighter than before. She turned to leave, then paused, looking back at me. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely audible. "For what you did. For the kids." Before I could respond, she was gone, her footsteps fading up the stairs. I sat there, alone again, but the silence felt different now, not oppressive, but open, like a door left ajar. We weren't healed. Not yet. But we'd taken a step. And for now, That was enough. The dining room was still. The chaos of earlier reduced to a quiet aftermath. The table, once a battlefield, now held only the letter and a few scattered papers, relics of the storm we'd weathered. Claire's words, "thank you," echoed in my mind, a small spark in the darkness of our conflict. I wanted to cling to it, to believe it was the beginning of something new. But the weight of her parting words, "I need time," kept me grounded. Forgiveness wasn't a switch to flip. It was a path, long and uncertain, and we were only at the start. I stood, my legs unsteady, and began clearing the table, needing something to do with my hands. The act felt futile, like trying to tidy a house after an earthquake. But it was all I had. I stacked the papers carefully, my fingers lingering on the letter. I'd written it to wound, to heal, to bridge the gap between us. But I hadn't anticipated how it would feel to see Claire's walls come down, even just a little. Her vulnerability had disarmed me, made me question the anger I'd nurtured for so long. David came downstairs, his face softer now, less burdened. "She's with the kids," he said, answering the question I hadn't asked. "They're getting ready for dinner." I nodded, my heart lifting at the thought of Lily and Max. Their innocence a reminder of why I'd fought so hard to keep this family afloat. "Are we still having Thanksgiving?" I asked, half joking, half afraid of the answer. David smiled, a tired but genuine smile. "Yeah, Mom. We're still having Thanksgiving." He helped me clear the table, his movements slow, deliberate. We worked in silence, the kind that comes from years of knowing each other, of weathering storms together. I thought of the boy he'd been, the one who'd clung to me when his father left, and felt a surge of love so fierce it hurt. I'd done this for him, for the life he'd built with Claire, for the grandchildren who filled my heart. But I'd also done it for myself, to prove I was more than the mother-in-law Claire dismissed, more than a paper plate pushed to the side. When the table was clear, David paused, looking at me. "You didn't have to do all this, Mom," he said, his voice low. "The bills, the secrets, you could have just told us." I shook my head, my throat tight. "You wouldn't have let me help. You're too proud, David." He laughed, a soft, rueful sound. "Guess I got that from you." His words caught me off guard, and I realized he was right. My pride had driven me to this, to the envelopes, the letter, the need to be seen. We set the table together, laying out the ceramic plates, the silverware, the napkins folded just so. It felt like a ritual, a way to reclaim the night, to make it something more than a reckoning. When Claire came downstairs, the kids trailing behind her, I braced myself, expecting her walls to be back up. But she looked at me, her eyes softer now, and gave a small nod. "Let's eat," she said, her voice steady but not cold. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a truce. And I'd take it. Lily and Max bounded to the table, their chatter filling the room with a warmth I'd almost forgotten. They didn't know about the bills, the secrets, the pain we'd inflicted on each other. They just knew their grandmother was here, that there was turkey and pie, that it was Thanksgiving. I watched them, my heart swelling, and felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this was what redemption looked like, not a grand gesture, but a quiet moment, a shared meal, a chance to start again. Claire carved the turkey, her hands steady, her movements practiced. David passed the mashed potatoes, his smile tentative but real. I took my place at the table, a ceramic plate in front of me, and felt a weight lift. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. We ate. The conversation light. Careful. Tiptoeing around the fault lines we'd exposed. But as the meal went on, I saw glimpses of the family. We could be Claire laughing at Max's joke, David's hand brushing hers, Lily's eyes bright as she talked about her dance recital. When dinner was over, Claire stood, gathering plates, and I joined her, our movements synchronized in a way they'd never been. In the kitchen, she paused, looking at me. "I don't know how to do this," she said, her voice low. "Be a family with you. But I want to try." Her words were a gift, fragile but real, and I felt tears prick my eyes. "Me too," I said, and for the first time, I believe we might get there. The kitchen was warm, the clatter of dishes a soft counterpoint to the quiet that had settled between Claire and me. Her words, "I want to try," hung in the air, a fragile promise that felt like the first real step toward something new. I wanted to hold on to it, to believe we could rebuild. But I knew it wouldn't be easy. We'd hurt each other too deeply, our wounds too fresh to heal overnight. Still, standing there, washing plates side by side, I felt a flicker of hope, like a candle that hadn't gone out despite the storm. Claire handed me a plate, her movements careful, as if she were testing the waters. "I didn't know how much you were doing," she said, her voice low, almost reluctant. I thought I had it all under control." I nodded, focusing on the plate in my hands, the soap suds sliding over the ceramic. "I didn't want you to feel like you didn't," I said. "I thought it would be easier that way." She laughed, a soft, bitter sound. "Easier? Nothing about this is easy." She was right. Nothing about family was easy to love. The loyalty, the pain of being bound to people who could hurt you the most. I'd spent a year building my case against her, nursing my resentment. But now, seeing her like this, vulnerable and unguarded, I realized how much I'd misjudged her. She wasn't the enemy. She was just human, like me, trying to hold her world together. "I'm sorry," I said, the words slipping out before I could stop them. "For the way I did this. For not talking to you sooner." Claire paused, her hands still in the sink, and looked at me. Her eyes were searching, as if she were trying to see past the anger, the hurt, to the woman I was underneath. "I'm sorry too," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "For the paper plates. For making you feel like you didn't belong." Her words hit me like a wave, washing away some of the bitterness I'd carried. I'd wanted her to see me, but maybe I hadn't seen her either, not really. We finished the dishes in silence, but it wasn't the heavy silence of before. It was softer, more open, like a conversation waiting to happen. When we returned to the dining room, David was playing with the kids, their laughter a balm to the rawness of the night. He looked up, his eyes meeting mine, and gave a small nod, as if to say we were okay, or at least on our way there. Claire sat beside him, her hand resting on his arm, and I saw something new between Thema quiet strength, born of the truth we'd all faced. As the evening wound down, I felt the weight of the day settle into me. It wasn't the Thanksgiving I'd planned, not the triumphant reckoning I'd imagined, but it was something better. It was real. We said our goodbyes, the kids hugging me tightly, their warmth a reminder of why I'd fought so hard. Claire walked me to the door. Her expression softer now. Less guarded. We'll talk soon, she said. And it wasn't a question. I nodded. My throat tight. I'd like that. Outside. The night was cold. The stars sharp against the sky. I walked to my car. My heart full and heavy at the same time. I'd come here seeking justice. Maybe even revenge. But I was leaving with something else, a chance at redemption. Not just for me, but for all of us. I thought of the letter, of the words I'd written about wanting to be a family, and felt a spark of hope. It wouldn't be easy, but it was possible. Driving home, I replayed the night in my mind, the envelopes, the confrontation, Claire's tears, her tentative apology. I'd wanted her to feel the weight of her actions, but I'd felt the weight of mine too. We were both flawed, both human, both trying to find our place in this messy, beautiful family. For the first time, I believe we might get there. Not because we'd erased the past, but because we'd faced it. When I got home, I sat at my kitchen table. The silence of my own house a stark contrast to the chaos of theirs. I pulled out a notebook and began to write. Not a letter this time, but a list of things I wanted to say to Claire, to David, to the kids. Things I wanted to do differently, ways I wanted to be better. It wasn't an ending, but a beginning, a map for the road ahead. The weeks after Thanksgiving passed quietly, the raw edges of that night softening with time. Claire and I didn't talk right away, but the silence wasn't hostile anymore. It was cautious, like two people learning to trust each other again. She texted me a few days later. A simple message, "Can we meet for coffee?" I stared at the words, my heart racing, and typed back a quick yes. It was a small step, but it felt monumental. A crack in the wall we'd both built. We met at a small cafe, the kind with mismatched chairs and the smell of fresh-baked scones. Claire was already there when I arrived, her hands wrapped around a mug, her eyes nervous but warm. We talked, haltingly at first, about the kids, the weather, anything but the night that had changed everything. But then she set her mug down, her fingers trembling slightly, and said, "I've been thinking about what you did. The bills. Everything. I don't know how to thank you." Her voice was soft, sincere, and it caught me off guard. I'd expected anger, maybe resentment, but not this. "You don't have to thank me," I said, my voice thick. "I did it because I love them. And you." The word slipped out, raw and true, and I saw her eyes glisten. She looked away, blinking quickly, then back at me. "I didn't make it easy for you," she said. "I was so focused on proving myself. I didn't see what you were doing. I'm sorry." It was the apology I'd wanted, but it didn't feel like victory. It felt like healing. We talked for hours, longer than we ever had. She told me about her fears, about the pressure to be the perfect wife, the perfect mother, the perfect everything. I told her about my own struggles, about feeling invisible, about the paper plates that had broken something in me. We laughed, a little, at how small it seemed now, how a single moment could spark so much pain. But we also talked about the future, about finding a way to be a family, not just for David and the kids, but for each other. Over the next few months, things changed. Slowly, imperfectly, but they changed. Claire invited me to Lily's dance recital, and I sat in the front row, my heart swelling as she twirled across the stage. David started a new job, a real one this time, and they began paying their own bills, bit by bit. I didn't stop helping entirely. I'd always be there for them, but it was different now. Open. Honest. No more secrets. One evening, Claire called me, her voice bright. "Come over for dinner," she said. "No paper plates. I promise." I laughed, the sound surprising me, and agreed. When I arrived, the table was set with the good china, the kind you save for special occasions. Lily and Max ran to hug me, their arms tight, and David smiled from across the room. Claire handed me a plate, her eyes meeting mine, and I saw something new there. Trust. Maybe. Or the beginning of it. We ate together. The conversation easy. The laughter real. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. I thought of the letter, of the envelopes, of the night I'd thought would break us. Instead, it had forced us to face the truth, to see each other, not as enemies, but as flawed, human, worthy of love. I'd wanted justice, maybe even revenge. But what I'd found was redemption, not just for me, but for all of us. As I drove home that night, the stars bright above me, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but we were on it together. I thought of the wooden tray from that night. The words etched in my mind, "Secrets break us. Truth heals." They were true. Truer than I'd known. We'd broken, but we were healing. And that was enough. More than enough.